Welcome to the City of Albany's Workplace Violence Prevention Training. This is a required training that must be completed on an annual basis. All employees are expected to complete this training no later than December 31st, 2023. Please ensure that you complete this training in its entirety. Your full participation is greatly appreciated. So, what is workplace violence? The city's understanding and policies are shaped by the laws of the state of New York. Workplace violence is any physical assault, aggressive or threatening behavior, or verbal abuse occurring in the workplace. Workplace violence includes, but is not limited to, physical attacks, fighting, pushing, or throwing objects, acts, or threats that are intended to intimidate, coerce, or cause fear of harm, whether made directly or indirectly, or by oral or written words, gestures, or symbols, and stalking with the intent to cause fear of harm. The workplace is defined as any location away from an employee's domicile, permanent or temporary, where an employee performs any work-related duty in the course of their employment for the City of Albany. The city's written policy statement can be found in Article 10 of the city's Policies and Procedures Manual. The goal and objective is to stay committed to the safety and security of our employees, visitors, guests, and other individuals on city property. Workplace violence presents a serious occupational safety hazard to employees, visitors, and guests of the City of Albany. The city's policies is as follows. The City of Albany hereby prohibits workplace violence against employees, visitors, or other individuals in the workplace, and will, consistent with civil service law and collectively negotiated agreements, initiate disciplinary procedures for anyone found to have violated this policy or article. The City is required to post this policy for all employees. So where can you find this policy? The Policy and Procedure Manual can be found on the city's intranet at the link you see here. The manual is provided to employees at onboarding and whenever it is updated. Employees must read and acknowledge receiving the manual and agree to its policies and procedures. Where does workplace violence come from? You. You are responsible for not perpetrating workplace violence on your colleagues and others. Committing acts of violence against your colleagues and others is a violation of the city's policy. Your fellow staff can also commit workplace violence. This includes supervisors, managers, or your colleagues. Visitors or guests of the city can also commit workplace violence. This includes customers or third-party contractors. Keep in mind that the same applies for who can experience workplace violence. That means just as much as any of these folk can be the perpetrator of workplace violence, they can experience workplace violence as well. Unfortunately, violence can occur at any place and any time. However, the New York State legislature found that certain unique factors of your job as a public employee may put you at additional risk to workplace violence. These include uncontrolled access to the workplace, working alone or in small numbers, working in public settings, working late night or early morning hours, areas of previous security problems. However, regardless of your specific work site, the New York State has determined that the following risks are always prevalent, regardless of where your work site is located. As a public employee, you are always at risk of employee internal disputes. Yelling and fighting is unacceptable behavior. If you experience this, you should respond by walking away, exiting the area immediately, and report the incident to your supervisor. If there has been a threat of workplace violence, fill out an incident report. If there is an immediate threat, call 911 immediately. When dealing with irritated or irate people outside of fellow staff, you should keep calm, do not escalate the situation, and walk away from irate individuals. If you have a panic or emergency button, Utilize it if necessary and then notify your supervisor. If there has been a threat of workplace violence, fill out an incident report. If there is an immediate threat, call 911. The city is also required to discuss with you your worksite specific hazards and how to respond to the hazards. If an evaluation identified a specific hazard at your worksite, it will be discussed with you through your supervisor. If you identify worksite specific hazards that have not been reported, discuss it with your supervisor. There are several types of workplace violence incidents. The majority of workplace violence incidents in the public sector workplace include assaults and verbal and nonverbal threats from the public in the form of customers and/or clients, or your coworkers, present or former. However, workplace violence incidents can also be committed by criminals with no connection with the workplace but enter to commit a robbery or other crime, or someone who does not work in the workplace but has a personal relationship with an employee. When it comes to workplace violence that has been perpetrated by employees to fellow employees, screaming, yelling, cursing, making derogatory remarks about to each other is unacceptable behavior in the workplace. As we have covered earlier in this presentation, workplace violence must involve physical harm or a real threat of physical harm. Therefore, screaming, yelling, cursing, and derogatory remarks are not always necessarily considered workplace violence, but such behaviors may very well lead to workplace violence. Therefore, arguing and yelling between employees will not be tolerated. If this happens to you, you should walk away, exit the area immediately, and report the incident to your supervisor. If you cannot exit, take appropriate action to get away. If there has been a threat or incident of workplace violence, fill out an incident report and submit to your supervisor. Workplace violence can also come from angry customers or guests of the city. Contrary to the old customer service saying, when it comes to threatening violence or harm, the customer is not always right. To reduce the risk of experiencing violence from an angry customer, you should know your department and worksite's protocol for safety. Depending on your department or worksite, this can include measures such as a panic button, dividers or barriers, rooms with doors that lock, closest phone, radio emergency button, or the nearest exit. There are several indicators of potential for violence from an employee. Often, change in a person's behavior, demeanor, or appearance are the biggest indicators of potential for violence. Of course, these signs may mean any number of issues, and we should be careful from becoming armchair psychiatrists. But these signs can indicate a problem, which may result in a violent act. Changes in job performance include examples such as increased absenteeism or tardiness, reduced productivity level, drastic changes in work habit, and disregard for safety procedures. If you have concerns about an employee's change in behavior, demeanor, or appearance, do not address this with them directly. Instead, bring it up with your supervisor in a confidential and private setting. Before we begin to discuss indicators of potential for violence and what you can do to protect yourself, it is very important to know that all matters of actual violence or imminent threat should be immediately reported to the police by dialing 911. Therefore, you should always know where the closest phone is or keep your phone on you. If there is a panic button in your work site, you should also know where this is located. When it comes to conflict among employees, internal arguing and yelling will not be tolerated. However, conflict between employees is an unfortunate fact of life in every organization. Therefore, your supervisors and managers play a major part in how the conflict plays out by either choosing to ignore the issue until it blows up or attempting to resolve the issue before it gets out of hand. Performance problems on the job are very often the result of strained professional relationships. Leaders of an organization are tasked with addressing the situations as soon as possible to avoid letting a minor conflict become a major problem. Personal characteristics of a troubled or potentially violent employee can also include change in personal hygiene, apparent substance abuse, apparent stress, holds grudges, places blame on others for problems, argues with coworkers often, sudden inability to concentrate, extreme changes in behavior, obsession with job or personal identity derived from job, obsession with weaponry of any kind, fascination with violence, strained work relationships, severe depression, feelings of oppression or victimization by management, inability to provide for family, behavior which is harassing, intimidating, or threatening to coworkers, has numerous conflicts with supervisors and coworkers. An existence of these characteristics does not immediately mean an employee is violent, but the existence of several of these characteristics within one person may indicate a troubled or potentially violent employee. We should strive to approach each other with compassion and empathy, and be careful not to jump to conclusions while being cautious and aware of our surroundings and potential threats. Again, if you have concerns about an employee's characteristics, do not address this with the colleague you are concerned about. Instead, reach out to your supervisor. Employee anger can often lead to conflict and resentment, which in turn, if left unchecked, can lead to an incident of workplace violence. An employee can become angry for any number of reasons. Therefore, it is the supervisor's responsibility to recognize and manage anger that has escalated beyond what would be considered normal among individual employees before the anger escalates into disruptive or violent behavior. There are physical signs that may indicate a person may become violent. Sometimes it is not what a person says, but what their body is doing. Use caution if you see someone who shows one or more of the following nonverbal signs or body language: flushed or pale face, sweating, pacing, restless or repetitive movements, signs of extreme fatigue such as dark circles under the eyes, trembling or shaking, clenched jaws or fist, exaggerated or violent gestures, change in voice, loud talking or chanting, shallow or rapid breathing, scowling, sneering, or use of abusive language, glaring or avoiding eye contact, and violating your personal space. These signs do not definitively point to potential violence. However, the more cues shown, the greater the risk of violence, and you should be on alert and be careful if you begin to notice these signs in an individual who is upset or troubled. If you identify with any of the characteristics of a troubled employee or any of the feelings of employee anger we have discussed, you should seek help. There is no shame in getting help. The city recognizes that navigating and managing feelings of anger or trouble is hard to do on one's own. Assistance is available through Capital EAP. You can contact Capital EAP through these phone numbers and its website. Contacting Capital EAP is confidential, and this service is provided to you free of charge. Lastly, if you are feeling suicidal, thinking about hurting yourself, or are concerned that someone you know may be in danger of hurting themselves, call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-TALK. That's 8255. This number is staffed by certified crisis response professionals. Now that we've identified signs of possible violence or trouble, how do you respond when someone at work is being violent or threatening violence? First, you should know the warning signs, both verbal and nonverbal, that we have just discussed. If there is not an immediate danger, talk to someone in your workplace, such as your supervisor, department head, or human resources. If violence occurs, remove yourself from the danger. Try to remain as calm as you can, and don't agitate the threatening party. If you can flee without injury, flee. If you are trapped and there are non-aggressors nearby, call out loudly for help. Unless you are about to be physically attacked, do not attempt to overpower the assailant. If you or someone else is in immediate danger, call 911. If someone assaults or threatens you at work, it does not matter whether they are a coworker or a member of the public. As a public employee and as a human being, you do not deserve to be assaulted or threatened. If someone in your workplace has been hurt because of workplace violence, call for medical help or the police right away, and then file an incident report. In incidences of workplace violence committed by someone who is neither a coworker nor a customer, the violence may be domestic violence, where the perpetrator has a personal relationship with an employee. Domestic violence is a pattern of coercive tactics which can include physical, psychological, sexual, economic, and emotional abuse perpetrated by one person against an adult intimate partner, with the goal of establishing and maintaining power and control over the victim. Domestic violence does not discriminate. Anyone of any race, age, sexual orientation, religion, or gender can be a victim or perpetrator of domestic violence. It affects people of all backgrounds and education levels. Domestic violence occurs within a wide spectrum of relationships. Married and formerly married couples, couples with children in common, couples who live together or have lived together, straight couples, gay, lesbian, bisexual, or transgender couples, and couples who are dating or who have dated in the past. If you or someone you know is experiencing domestic violence, please contact one of these agencies that are ready and willing to help. The New York State Office for the Prevention of Domestic Violence, also known as OPDV. The New York State Coalition Against Domestic Violence, Equinox, the Homeless and Travelers Aid Society. Domestic violence can happen to anyone, and there is no shame in reaching out for help. Your safety comes first. If you are experiencing domestic or sexual violence, you can contact the New York State Domestic and Sexual Violence Hotline at 1-800-942-6906. This number is language accessible and also accessible to the hearing impaired. You can also always call 911. If it is not safe to use the phone, you can also try using www.thehotline.org to chat with the National Domestic Violence Hotline. Regarding the city's policy on reporting an incident of workplace violence, any person subjected to, witnessing, or aware of a violation of the workplace violence prevention policy should immediately contact their supervisor, department head, human resources director, or the Commissioner of Administrative Services, and complete an incident report form. A supervisor or department head receiving a report of a violation of the workplace violence prevention policy must immediately report and forward the incident report form to the Commissioner of Administrative Services, EEO office, and the Human Resources Director. The Commissioner of Administrative Services or their appointee will meet with the reporting individual, explain the procedure to investigate the complaint, and outline other options available. Any employee wishing to discuss their complaint with someone other than the Commissioner of Administrative Services or appointee should make their desire known to a supervisor, department head, Human Resources Director, EEO office, or the Commissioner of Administrative Services in a way that is comfortable for the individual making the report. The matter shall then be referred to the Corporation Counsel's office to be handled. If you experience violence in the workplace, you must file an incident report. New York State requires the following information to be provided in an incident report. Not only is this information part of the New York State requirements, it also helps the city make a determination of whether workplace violence has occurred. Incident reports are required to have the following information: workplace location, time of day and shift, incident description, including what happened just prior to the incident and how the incident ended, names and job titles of employees involved, name of others identifiers of customers involved, if any, extent of injuries, and names of witnesses. Please be as specific as possible. After you file an incident report, your employer must be given a reasonable opportunity to address concerns. If your employer is unable to correct the employee concern or hazard after a reasonable opportunity, and the employee still feels imminent danger or a dangerous situation still exists, a public employee safety and health complaint may be initiated. Albany's Bureau of Public Employee Safety and Health, also known as PESH, District Office phone number is 518-457-5508. It is also important to note that retaliation is unlawful. That means the employer may take no adverse action against an employee because they filed a complaint, participated in the investigation, gave statements to the investigator, and or exercised any other right provided for in the Act. This also means that if you are accused of workplace violence, regardless of whether it is substantiated or not substantiated, you may not under any circumstances retaliate against your accuser. If you believe you are being discriminated against for filing a complaint of workplace violence, participating in an investigation, giving a statement to the investigator, or exercising any of your rights provided for in the state's 2006 Act, you may file a complaint with PESH within 30 days of the adverse action. The PESH Bureau will then investigate and provide a finding within 90 days. If discrimination is found, the case is sent to the Attorney General for prosecution. This concludes this city's training on workplace violence prevention. If you have any questions or concerns, you may contact Human Resources or EEO at the following phone number and email address. Thank you for your participation.